When the light of a golden age fades, it does not disappear all at once. It fractures, and sometimes, those fractures begin from within. Before we begin, take a moment. If you are someone who seeks truth hidden inside history, who wants to understand not just what happened but why it keeps happening again and again, then stay with this journey till the end. And if this kind of deep storytelling speaks to you, make sure you stay connected, because what you're about to hear is not just history, it's a warning. This is the story of what happened after the reign of Prophet Suleman, peace be upon him. A time when power reached its peak, and then began to collapse. But before we step into that collapse, we must understand something far deeper. What do the three divine books say about this moment? The Torah speaks of a kingdom built by wisdom but later divided by disobedience. It describes how the unity of Bani Israel was not guaranteed forever, but conditional upon obedience and justice. The Bible tells of Solomon's unmatched kingdom, but also warns of his later years when deviations began to appear. It speaks of how the seeds of division were planted even before his death. The Quran gives us the purest lens. It reminds us that Suleman, peace be upon him, was a king unlike any other. A prophet who ruled with justice, commanded jinn, controlled the winds, and established a system of power rooted in divine guidance. But the Quran also makes something very clear. Power is a test, and no matter how great a kingdom becomes, if the people after it lose wisdom, that power becomes a burden. And that is where our story begins. A kingdom at its peak. Jerusalem stood as the heart of a civilization unlike any the world had seen before. Wealth flowed, armies stood disciplined, knowledge was respected, justice was enforced. The rule of Suleman, peace be upon him, was not just strong, it was balanced. But the problem with golden ages is this. They create an illusion that this level of stability will last forever. An illusion that the system is too strong to fail. An illusion that the next generation will automatically carry the same wisdom. And history has proven again and again that this illusion is deadly. As Suleman, peace be upon him, approached the end of his life, something subtle but dangerous was already happening beneath the surface. The people were enjoying the results of greatness, without understanding the responsibility that created it. They saw wealth, but forgot discipline. They saw power, but forgot obedience. They saw unity, but forgot the effort required to maintain it. And when a generation forgets the foundation of its strength, the fall becomes inevitable. After the passing of Suleman, peace be upon him, the throne did not remain empty. It passed to his son, Rehoboam, a man born into power, but not molded by struggle. And this is where the turning point begins. Because leadership is not inherited through blood, it is earned through wisdom. And wisdom cannot be inherited. It must be developed. Rehoboam inherited a kingdom that was powerful, wealthy, and unified. But he also inherited something else. Pressure. The kind of pressure that only exists after a golden era. The people came to him with a request. Not rebellion, not war, just a request. They said, "Your father ruled us with strength, but his rule was heavy. Reduce the burden, ease the pressure, and we will remain loyal to you." This moment was everything. This was the test that would decide whether the kingdom stays united or breaks forever. Rehoboam had two choices. He could listen to the elders, the wise men who had served under Suleman, peace be upon him. Men who understood leadership, balance, and human nature. Or he could listen to his peers, the young men who grew up in luxury, who saw power as dominance, not responsibility. He chose the second, and that decision shattered an empire. The young advisors told him something dangerous. They said, "Do not show weakness. Do not reduce the burden. Increase it. Show them that your rule will be stronger than your father's." And Rehoboam listened. He stood before the people and gave his answer. Not with humility, but with arrogance. He said, "My father disciplined you with whips. I will discipline you with scorpions." In that moment, everything changed. Because power without wisdom always turns against itself. The people did not respond with negotiation. They responded with separation. 10 tribes of Israel broke away. They refused to accept his rule. They chose a new leader, Jeroboam, and just like that, the United Kingdom of Suleman, peace be upon him, was no more. It split into two, the northern kingdom, Israel, and the southern kingdom, Judah. Brothers became rivals. A nation became divided, and the beginning of a long decline had started. But here's what makes this story even more powerful. The division was not caused by enemies. It was not caused by invasion. It was not caused by weakness in resources. It was caused by leadership failure. One wrong decision, one moment of arrogance, one refusal to listen, and an entire civilization fractured. Now pause for a moment and think. How many times has this happened in history? Empires rise. They reach their peak, and then they collapse from within. This is not just the story of Bani Israel. This is a pattern we will continue to uncover. Because while the kingdom of Israel and Judah were now separate, they were not stable. In fact, the division made them weaker. And far away another power was rising. A power that was watching, waiting, growing. The Neo-Assyrian Empire. A force that would soon take advantage of this fragmentation. Because when unity breaks, external threats do not need to attack immediately. They wait. They let the internal weakness grow. And then, they strike. But before that strike comes, we must understand what happened inside these two kingdoms. Because division is never just political. It becomes spiritual, moral, cultural, and once that begins, the damage becomes irreversible. This is where the real story begins. And what comes next is not just about kings and battles. It is about a warning. A warning that echoes even today. And if you think this is just ancient history, then you haven't been paying attention. Because the same cracks, the same arrogance, the same leadership failures are happening again, right now. When a kingdom divides, the damage is not immediate. At first, everything seems manageable. Life continues. Markets function. Armies still stand. Leaders still sit on their thrones. And for a brief moment, people convince themselves that nothing has really changed. But beneath that surface, something begins to rot. Because unity is not just about borders. It is about purpose. And when purpose breaks, everything else slowly follows. After the split, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah began walking two very different paths. But both paths led toward decline. Let us begin with the northern kingdom, Israel, led by Jeroboam. At first glance, Jeroboam seemed like a strong alternative. The people had chosen him. He was seen as a leader who understood their frustrations. Someone who could offer a fresh start. But Jeroboam had a problem. A deep insecurity. He knew that Jerusalem, the spiritual center, was still in Judah. He knew that if people continued to travel there for worship, their hearts might return to the house of Rehoboam. And fear, when it enters leadership, creates dangerous decisions. Instead of strengthening faith, Jeroboam manipulated it. He created new centers of worship. He placed idols. He told the people, "This is enough for you. You do not need to go to Jerusalem anymore." And just like that, the foundation began to crack. Because when leadership alters truth for political survival, it does not protect the kingdom. It poisons it. The Torah and the Bible both describe this moment as a turning point. A deliberate deviation, a shift from obedience to convenience. And the Quran reminds us of a universal principle. When truth is replaced with falsehood, decline becomes inevitable. The people of Israel slowly began drifting. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually. And that is how corruption always spreads. It does not come as a storm. It comes as a slow change. A compromise here, a shortcut there, until one day, the entire system is unrecognizable. Meanwhile in Judah, things were not as stable as they appeared either. Rehoboam still ruled from Jerusalem. He still had the legacy of Suleman, peace be upon him. He still had the temple. But he did not have the wisdom. Instead of learning from the division, he hardened. Instead of rebuilding trust, he focused on control. And over time, Judah also began to weaken. Because division does not just create two weaker states. It creates a cycle of rivalry. Israel and Judah began to see each other not as brothers but as threats. Conflicts erupted, alliances shifted, trust disappeared, and while they were busy competing with each other, they forgot something critical. There were greater powers rising around them. This is the part of history that many overlook. Because internal conflict feels urgent. It feels important. It feels like the biggest issue. But often, it blinds nations to the real danger. And far to the northeast that danger was growing. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, a civilization built not just on power but on expansion. They were disciplined, strategic, relentless, and most importantly patient. They watched the Levant carefully. They saw the fragmentation. They saw the weakening alliances. They saw the internal corruption. And they understood something that divided nations never realize. You do not need to destroy them. You just need to wait. Because they will weaken themselves. And when the time is right, you take everything. But before that moment arrives, something even more tragic unfolds inside Israel and Judah. The loss of moral clarity. Prophets were sent. Warnings were given. Again and again. Messengers rose among the people. Calling them back. Reminding them. Warning them. Return to justice. Return to truth. Return to obedience. But the response was not always acceptance. Sometimes it was rejection. Sometimes it was resistance. And sometimes it was silence. And silence is one of the most dangerous responses. Because it means people have stopped caring. The Bible records how prophets were ignored, mocked, even harmed. The Torah reflects the repeated cycle of warning and disobedience. And the Quran highlights this pattern clearly. When nations ignore guidance, consequences follow. Not as punishment alone, but as the natural result of their own choices. In Israel, kings rose and fell rapidly. Instability became normal. Power struggles increased. Assassinations were not uncommon. And every new ruler promised strength but often delivered more chaos. In Judah, the situation was slightly more stable, but not by much. There were moments of reform. Moments where leaders tried to return to the right path. But those moments were short-lived. Because the overall direction was still downward. Now think about this carefully. Two kingdoms, same origin, same heritage, same history of greatness, both declining, but not because of lack of resources, not because of external destruction, but because of internal failure. Leadership without wisdom, faith without sincerity, power without responsibility, this combination is always destructive. And as this internal decay continued, the Assyrians moved closer. Not in panic, not in haste, but with precision. City by city, region by region, they expanded, and every time they advanced, the divided kingdoms had a choice. Unite, or fall separately, but unity requires humility. And humility was in short supply. Instead of coming together, alliances were formed with other powers. Temporary solutions, short-term thinking, desperate strategies. And history shows us that desperate strategies rarely save nations. They only delay the inevitable. And then, the moment arrived. The Assyrian king turned his full attention toward Israel. The northern kingdom, already weakened, already unstable, already drifting. And when the attack came, it was overwhelming. Cities fell, resistance collapsed, and the kingdom that once stood as part of a united empire was taken. Its people were exiled, dispersed, lost among nations. This was not just a military defeat. It was the end of Israel as a kingdom. A consequence. Years in the making. And Judah watched. From the south, they saw what happened. They saw the destruction. They saw the exile. They saw the warning. In real time. And for a moment there was fear. A realization. A chance to change. But history is not just about warnings. It is about responses to those warnings. And that response would determine Judah's fate. Because what comes next is not just a continuation of decline. It is a lesson so powerful that it echoes even today. The fall of Israel should have been enough. It should have shaken Judah to its core. A neighboring kingdom, once part of the same united empire, erased. Its people scattered, its cities silent, its identity fractured. This was not a distant warning. This was right next door. And yet, the most dangerous thing a nation can do after witnessing destruction is to believe it cannot happen to them. Judah stood alone now, the last remnant of what was once a powerful, united kingdom under Suleman, peace be upon him. Jerusalem still stood, the temple still stood, the legacy still stood, but legacy alone does not protect a nation. Only actions do. For a brief period, there were moments of awakening. Leaders arose who tried to correct the path. They called people back to truth. They attempted reforms. They tried to rebuild the moral and spiritual foundation that had been weakened over time. And for a moment it seemed like perhaps Judah had learned the lesson. But here is the reality that history teaches again and again. Temporary change is not enough. A moment of fear is not enough. A short period of reform is not enough. Because if the core mindset does not change, the cycle returns. And it did, slowly, almost silently. Judah began slipping again. Complacency returned, corruption returned, injustice returned, and perhaps most dangerously, the illusion of safety returned. They believed that because they had survived, they were somehow protected. That their identity, their history, their connection, would shield them. But protection is not inherited. It is maintained, and when it is neglected, it disappears. While Judah was moving between moments of reform and relapse, the world around them was changing rapidly. The Assyrian Empire, the same force that destroyed Israel, began to weaken. And for a moment, it seemed like the threat was fading. But history does not leave vacuums. When one power declines, another rises. And from the east, a new empire began to emerge. Stronger, more strategic, more determined. The Babylonian Empire. This was not just another regional power. This was a force that would redefine the entire landscape. And just like the Assyrians before them, they were watching, observing, waiting, because divided or unstable nations always become targets. And Judah, despite surviving longer than Israel, was not truly stable. Internal weakness still existed, leadership still fluctuated, the people still struggled between obedience and deviation. And then, the pressure began. Babylon did not immediately destroy Judah. Instead, they applied control. They demanded loyalty. They imposed influence. They turned Judah into a dependent state. And this is where another critical lesson appears. Not all collapses begin with destruction. Some begin with dependency. When a nation loses its independence, even if it still stands, the decline has already begun. Judah had a choice: submit and stabilize, or resist without preparation. And once again, the wrong choices were made. Rebellion without strength, defiance without unity, decisions driven by emotion, not wisdom. And Babylon responded. The first wave came. Jerusalem was attacked, not completely destroyed, but weakened. Important figures were taken. A warning. Just like Israel had once been a warning. Another chance. Another opportunity to change course. But history shows us that repeated warnings often lose their impact. People adjust. They normalize danger. They convince themselves that things are still under control. And then the final moment arrives. The Babylonian king returned. This time, not for control, but for destruction. Jerusalem was surrounded. The city that once symbolized unity, strength, and divine guidance now stood on the edge of collapse. Inside the walls, fear spread. Supplies ran low. Hope began to fade. And outside, the Babylonian forces waited. Patient, certain, because they knew something that Judah refused to accept. The fall had already happened internally. This was just the final stage. When the walls were finally breached, it was not just a military defeat. It was the end of an era. Jerusalem was destroyed. The temple was destroyed. The center of their identity gone. And the people were taken. Exiled. Just like Israel before them, the United Kingdom that once stood under Suleman, peace be upon him, had now completely vanished from the map. Not because of one enemy, not because of one battle, but because of a chain of decisions, a chain of arrogance, a chain of ignored warnings. And this is where the true lesson of this story lies. Because this is not just about Israel and Judah. This is about every nation, every community, every generation. The pattern is always the same. Unity creates strength. Strength creates success. Success creates comfort. Comfort creates complacency. Complacency creates division. And division leads to collapse. The Neo-Assyrians did not destroy a strong, united empire. They took advantage of a fractured one. Babylon did not defeat a wise, disciplined nation. They crushed a weakened one. And this is the part most people ignore. External enemies are rarely the real cause of collapse. They are the final step. The real cause is always internal. Now look around. Look at the world today. Look at nations divided. Look at leadership struggles. Look at people choosing pride over wisdom. Look at societies drifting away from truth, while still holding onto symbols of greatness. Does it feel familiar? It should, because history does not repeat exactly, but it echoes perfectly. The story of what happened after Suleman, peace be upon him, is not just a historical account. It is a mirror, a reflection of what happens when unity is lost. When leadership lacks wisdom, when warnings are ignored, and when people believe that collapse cannot happen to them. But it always can, and it always does when the same mistakes are repeated. So the question is not what happened back then. The question is what is happening now. And more importantly, what will happen next. If this journey made you see history differently, if it made you realize that these stories are not just about the past but about the present and the future, then stay connected. Because every episode we uncover is not just a story. It is a warning. And sometimes the difference between survival and collapse is whether we choose to listen. This was episode 96. The kingdom divides. When unity breaks, the fall begins. And what comes after depends on those who are willing to learn. Stay with us.